exploring unknown regions of our reality.
And she looks out and sees these lights in the sky and these different patterns drifting like they were going to land.
Examining the depths of human perception.
I remember when I was awake and I realized I was awake, I started to sort of scan the room and I realized that something was wrong.
Pursuing the elusive and unseen.
Electronics started acting up, ceased to work, overheated.
You have just entered a road of wondrous mystery.
And so when we get around this bend in the road and this group of trees, we look up in the sky and there's this craft and it is huge.
A place where sometimes our darkest terrors dwell.
I've never seen anything like this, and instantly I could feel the fear.
You've just turned on to the Paranormal Road. Paranormal Road.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0, ignition, liftoff.
And welcome. You have now entered the Paranormal Road. Hey, Randy, how's it going?
It's going good, Dave.
What's for supper tonight?
Wow, we just opened the show. It's been, what, a second, and you're already wanting to know what's for dinner?
I'm sorry. That's one of the perks of being here. It's just, it's too good food. What can I say?
Every show, there's Dave and Louis, the program director, wanting to know what's for dinner.
So what is for dinner?
Tonight, I'm really going to splurge and order pizza.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
I'm taking a night off. How about that?
Wow. Okay, well, this is going to be a quick show. No, I'm just kidding. No, seriously, food is not the only thing I think about. I think an awful lot about the paranormal, hence Paranormal Road.
And dessert. You think a lot about dessert, too?
Well, yeah, maybe just a little bit. But seriously, we got a lot of good shows that are planned up in the months or weeks ahead. And we're going to talk about a little bit about them. Randy, who do we got scheduled next week?
Next week we have Travis Sanders. He is kind of stationed, I guess you'd say, out of our favorite metaphysical shop, It's Your Journey. He does readings there. He works sort of behind the scenes in the story and also out front. And he's got a book out. It's called I'm Psychic, So Are You.
He teaches a lot of classes there.
He does. He has like so much going on that I guess the best way to do it is to just read his bio.
Okay.
Because I don't want to jump out of line and screw anything up here, so let me make sure I read it right. It says that Travis is a young but accomplished clairvoyant medium, intuitive consultant, and teacher who has been working professionally since the age of 16. His work with spirit has been featured on numerous radio and television programs, including CBS Radio and the A&E series Psychic Kids. Children of the Paranormal. In addition to his readings, he also is a Reiki master, quantum life coach, past life regression, and soul retrieval practitioner. And we're going to hit on a little bit of all of that, I hope, with him next week.
Most definitely.
And I'm sure he's going to talk a little bit about his book and upcoming things. I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me, but I think he actually has another book in the works too.
Yeah, and if you're, again, interested in reading his books, I know you can definitely get them by going online to itsyourjourney.com. And you can certainly order his book there, and it is a very interesting read.
He has a great following, and if you want to get a reading with him, you need to get it booked because he rarely has open spots.
Yep. So excited to talk to Travis next week. Also coming up, for those who are into the cryptids, like I am.
Yes, very much so. David sees Bigfoots everywhere.
I do not. I've never seen a Bigfoot. Although I would like to see
He says he'd like to see one from, an armored vehicle.
Exactly. About a half mile away. I'm not ready. I don't think I'll ever be ready for the up-close encounter, but I would like to hear one once, like the Ohio call.
I told him, well, don't do that call again. Dave did one of his, what was it, Samurai Chatters?
Yeah,
that wasn't as cool this time, Dave.
But we have Amy Boo, who is a investigator for BFRO, and she will be on the show talking about some of her cases, investigations in the Ohio area. In addition, we have a couple other witnesses that we'll be interviewing that have seen this elusive beast, had an encounter. So I'm really stoked about that show as well, because I am very fascinated by the Bigfoot subject matter and pretty much all cryptids. I think it's pretty incredible myself.
And for some of our listeners that don't know, actually Salt Fork State Park is where they hold one of the largest Bigfoot conventions
in the world.
Right, and there's been a lot of sightings in that part of the country down there.
So I'm really, really excited about that show. We got quite a few really good shows that are coming up. And now that we've hit 10 shows, the feedback is coming in.
The mail's in.
You've got mail.
If you have questions or comments, please send us a message via Paranormal Road on Facebook. Just simply look us up on Facebook, find Paranormal Road, and click send message. Give us your feedback, what you'd like to see on the show, maybe some topics you have. And if you have any questions for us in regards to the paranormal EVP mediums, for Shelley, for Joyce, for Stefan, any of us here at Paranormal Road and EVP mediums, feel free to send us a message. Randy, what's our first feedback we have?
Dave, our first feedback we got was, of course, about our first episode, which really got a lot of notoriety. People were emailing us left and right about it, so we couldn't use them all, so we just grabbed one from the hat. And
from the hat?
Yeah,
no pun intended.
Speaking of the hat, the first episode was the Hat Man. And from our first email that was sent to us, it says, the Hat Man episode scared the hell out of me. When I was a teenager back in the 80s, my dad told me about a visit he had from the Hat Man. His encounter took place in the 40s. I always believed my dad, as he was a good and honest man. He would never make up that kind of a story. Your show really brought to us the reality of this thing and brought it to light. I didn't know this Hat Man often visits other family members like it did yours, Dave. So far, I've been spared. Thanks, y'all, for giving me many sleepless nights. That came from Rick Z in Evansville, Kentucky.
Yeah, well, trust me, Rick, after that encounter, I had many, many sleepless nights myself. But I now sleep with a salt lamp in my bedroom, so there is some light there, and it is believed that salt lamps ward off negative energy. So I feel confident that as long as I burn that salt lamp, I'm not going to have any future visits from the Hat Man. Let's hope and pray.
I've never encountered it and never want to.
Yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. Okay, our second feedback. Great show. Love the topic so far. Keep up the good work. By the way, love the bumper music. Pat from Stanwell Park, Australia. Why, thank you, Pat. We are really honored that you are listening to our show Down Under. And if you know anyone in Australia that has had an experience with the Yowie, please get in touch with us. I would really love to talk to someone about the Yowie. And for our listeners who don't know what the Yowie is, that is the Australian version of the American Bigfoot.
And I'm going to give you the third input we got from somebody. It says, last week's show, EVP Mediums, ITCs, and Randy. I've been a follower of EVP Mediums for a long time now and have been to one of your lectures. I love your investigations and you all have taught me a lot. I just want to point out that you missed a couple of things in regards to the dangers of conducting EVPs. Dave, you didn't mention the dangers of conducting spirit communication in known haunted places with bad energy, such as prisons and insane asylums. Also, at your lecture, you mentioned the dangers of doing EVPs in cemeteries. You might want to talk about that in future shows regarding EVP communication. Anyway, love the show. Keep up the good work. You guys are awesome. That came from Dee Dee in LaGrange, Ohio.
Dee Dee, you are absolutely right, and I thank you for pointing that out. So I'm going to take a few seconds now to address what I was remiss in bringing up. As far as doing EVPs, we strongly recommend not doing them in a cemetery. We have had several instances in the beginning when we did EVPs in the cemetery that did not turn out well. Very angry and not so pleasant entities, and in one case I'm not so convinced that this entity was even human. But think of it this way: if you go to a large cemetery and there are 100, 1,000 plots, and you're out there doing communication, you don't know what type of energy you're going to tap into. You may tap into a rapist. You may tap into someone who is angry. There could be a killer that was buried in that cemetery, a serial killer. You don't know what you're messing with, so you don't know what's going to come through. So we do caution you about doing EVPs in a cemetery. As far as prisons and insane asylum, again, doing EVPs in these locations may seem cool to get voices, but again, the energy that's there is very negative. Especially a prison. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that we're dealing with angry, repressed, or nasty entities.
And not only is it just, it might be cool to the living, but it's cruel to the dead.
Yeah, it's torment, especially places that capitalize on haunted tours over and over and over again. It's almost like if you can imagine a daily basis, people coming into where you're living or where you're dwelling dead, but people coming in over and over again asking the same questions over and over again. Also in insane asylums, the energy there, same thing. Why would you want to conduct these type of sessions with that type of energy around? Also, it's hard to say this because I did it. We don't really recommend doing EVPs in your home. Again, you could be inviting something or opening something in your home that you live in. That's your space, your comfortable space. And if you're doing EVPs in your home, it could cause some problems down the road. So be very cautious on these areas when conducting EVPs. And Dee Dee, thank you so much for bringing that up. We were remiss in not bringing that in that episode 10 about safeguards in EVP communication.
And in some of our upcoming episodes, we're going to talk more about EVP and ITC communications. We're even going to play some of our more profound Class A EVPs. And also, Dee Dee, we're going to make sure that we tell people how to, safeguard themselves against anything bad that could come in.
All right, our next question is for you, Randy. It says, do you see and hear the dead on a daily basis? I mean, like when you go to the supermarket or the bank, do you have spirits come up to you wanting help? If so, how do you handle it? And that's Connie T. from Orano, I believe that's how it's pronounced, Orano, Maine.
Well, Connie, actually, I do see spirits just about everywhere, but I handle it by how strongly they're after me. I mean, if a spirit really wants to tell me something, they're going to. Usually, not always in the grocery store, even though I spend a lot of my time there shopping for food for the team. But I guess you could say if there's a spirit wandering and it's in the grocery store or at the bank, yeah, they would get my attention. I pretty much handle it by how urgent it seems. If the spirit really comes across urgent, like there's just something that they gotta get out to me, then I'll attempt to let them in. Other than that, I have to have my own time and my own space. And, I try to communicate back to that spirit that, hey, this is my time right now. And I will open up at a certain point and let you in.
So by appointment only.
By appointment only. Sorry, but it's gotten that way. I've even given the description to people before that sometimes it's like I'm the only adult standing in a room full of children and they all want to tell me a story at the same time. So yes, I have to tell even the children, take your turn.
And I can attest to that. After we closed the restaurant, I started work as a quality control manager for a faucet manufacturing company, well known in the industry for RVs and boats. And I was there about a week and a half, and they had a position open. So I notified Randy, and he took the job, and so we were both working for the same company. Well, it wasn't a week that he was there, and he came into my office, and he had that look on his face, and I'm like, oh no, please don't. And he said, David, he said, there's an angry man back in the corner of the warehouse. And I was like, don't say anything. You're going to get us fired. Don't even bring it up.
But, it was one of those things, you just can't ignore it when you're walking around the warehouse and there's this spirit, like, kind of nagging at you and trying to get your attention, like, I can do something for him or do something to change how he felt.
And you saw him pretty clear, the description of him.
Right. And, it was strange after that. We did finally build up the nerve to talk to a couple of people about it. And after describing the spirit that I saw, it turns out that it was the previous owner whose son was now running the business, but it was his father. And his father seemed frustrated at the way things were going.
Yeah, his father apparently had other opinions of what he would have liked done in the plant, but that was pretty amazing, because when he described him to me, and I ended up talking to someone and the other people within the plant, the description that Randy gave matched identically to the original, one of the original owners of the company.
And there's actually a situation at my new place of employment where that same thing happened to me after being there a few weeks, where a spirit kind of came to me also. And come to find out, that one also was a relative of the original owners.
And you haven't seen anything there recently, have you?
Not really.
Good. And our next one, you guys made snot come out of my nose laughing. What did you guys have for dinner on episode 10? I was dying to know. Kim from Norwalk, Ohio.
Hey, Grandpa! What's for supper? Well, tonight you're really in for a treat.
We had Randy burgers, seasoned fries, all topped off with chocolate cake. Even Grandpa Jones would have been proud of that meal, Randy.
Yeah!
Oh, Randy burgers, in case no one knows, is just hamburgers with whatever kind of seasoning I grab out of the cabinet and sling on there before everybody gets here.
All right, episode 10 is my favorite so far. First hour was especially amazing. Tapioca time.
Oh God, here we go. Now it's dessert.
Yeah, and that's from David in New Orleans, Louisiana. Well, David, actually, you're going to love tonight's show if you're listening, because tonight's show takes place in the French Quarter in New Orleans.
Our last message we got actually was forwarded to us from our friends over at Graveyard Tales. They had someone comment on their page about listening to our episode. And when we interviewed Graveyard Tales, a lot of their listeners actually followed, and followed up by going to our Facebook page and making a comment. So the comment was, "I'm here by way of Graveyard Tales. Can't wait to binge listen." And that was from Thomas R.
And we're so glad, Thomas, that you're listening to Paranormal Road. It means a great deal to us, to all of you who have taken time out to share your questions with us, and your feedback means a great deal to us.
We've got a great show for you tonight. William Haddox is back with another edition of the Haddox Report. Strange things are happening over the skies in the United Kingdom.
Also on tonight's show, the Paranormal Road takes us all the way to the French Quarter to my favorite city of New Orleans.
In 1995, Chad and Alta experienced their first UFO, a massive sight in Hammond, Louisiana. This experience opened their eyes and led them to the well-known French Quarter in New Orleans, where the high strangeness continued. We hear all about how their encounter unfolded on tonight's show.
Good evening, everybody, or morning or afternoon or whatever, it doesn't matter. We are Graveyard Tales. Now, if you like ghost stories, hauntings, cryptid encounters, and the weird history behind them, then you should join us in the graveyard.
You can find us on any of your favorite podcast providers. Check out our website at graveyardpodcast.com and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and on Twitter at GRV. Just go search Graveyard Tales.
That would be easier. Now, we hope to see you in the graveyard.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Professional UFO investigator and special assignment reporter for Paranormal Road. It's the Haddox Report.
Now this is William Haddox with the Haddox Report, bringing another episode of something I found that was very interesting, that I done the best research I could on this particular incident. This was back on December the 20th of 2018 over in the UK. It was Gatewick International Airport. And they had a report of drones flying around, which actually caused a huge stir. Tens of thousands of people were, flights were canceled. People were stuck on airplanes for multiple hours with really no relief or explanation in sight. All the reports from news media that I could find anyway were all saying that there were multiple drones that were seen and causing havoc, and how dangerous that drones are to aircraft, which definitely makes sense. Biggest issue that I had with the whole entire story was there was never any proof or photos or anything of an actual drone. Military was called in with their snipers, which I'm not sure what good that would have done. It'd be very hard to shoot down a drone. This lasted over a 36-hour period. Flights were diverted as far away as Paris. People were not allowed back, to the Gatewick airport. Everything was kind of more or less quarantined off. If you were there, you were pretty well stuck. And it was really a huge mess that never was actually resolved. From what I could gather, a couple people were arrested but let go because they really didn't have anything to charge them or hold them with. Just all seemed very skeptical. The reason I'm bringing a lot of this up is I want to compare this to some of the older UFO cases throughout, at least the U.S. history anyway. And in the past, everybody, always used the excuse of weather balloon. That's what kind of the go-to thing from Roswell all the way up. Well, now it looks like the drones have become the modern day weather balloon. I mean, that's what everybody wants to blame it on. Obviously, there was some kind of objects flying around that people were seeing. Of course, there was never any videos or photos, at least that I found. So, when you mention UFOs, it doesn't necessarily mean extraterrestrial or alien or anything of that sort, but something was sure flying around that nobody could give an explanation to, or even have any proof of, so seems logical, I guess, that they would just blame it on a drone. And since that seems to be the new thing, that a lot of people know what drones are, but are not necessarily familiar with them, same as the weather balloon. Back in those days, everybody had heard of a weather balloon, maybe have saw a photograph of one, but really never had any idea of, the flight patterns that they may make, or the altitudes, how they operate. And same with drones. People that fly them are definitely experienced in what they can and can't do, type of lights that are on them, the different safety measures that maybe prevent them from going towards airports or certain altitudes, that kind of thing. But the majority of public, they might be able to identify a drone if they saw one sitting on a shelf somewhere in a store, or if somebody just had one in their neighborhood. But as far as knowing the ins and outs and what they're capable of, most people really don't have much of an idea. So it's an easy kind of fail-safe thing to just fall back on. But being that I am in the U.S., obviously, I don't know a lot of the different news outlets and things that are over in that part of the world in the U.K. Just basic stuff I ran across on Twitter feeds and other social media is what I had to go on. So I reached out to a contact of mine, actually a good friend, that lives in Scotland, and I'm going to bring him on so he can kind of give a little more of a rundown of how he, figured out about the situation, because it was really not reported here at all on regular media. I don't remember seeing it at all other than, like I said, social media. So I want to bring him on, and that's Chris, a.k.a. the Mad Scotsman. So what's going on?
Hey, how you doing? All right?
Yeah, doing all right. Yeah, I thought I'd bring you on, and maybe you could give the listening audience kind of a brief rundown of what you found out, or what you might think was odd about the case, or stuff that didn't add up. Stuff from your perspective.
Well, straight away when it kind of broke, I remember it was, I believe it was the 19th of December, but it was or it was the 18th. It was the early hours. I was later at night, but into the early hours when it was first reported, and I was completely obsessed with it, because it was for such, like, in the past we've had problems with drones in airports before, and they're usually they'll maybe shut part of the airport down for 30 minutes or something until the drone disappears, and then everything's back to normal. But the fact that the length of the incident, how long it lasted, it was kind of incredible. And then from the beginning, the reported sightings of the I'm not going to say drone, but drones from passengers and even pilots speaking about how pilots communicating with each other and saying, look, we're spotting these drones on the runway, flying in unison and stuff, and it was just really kind of bizarre. And there's just something that doesn't quite make sense about the whole kind of incident,
From what I gathered too, though, wasn't there a protest there either earlier in the same day or the day before all this drone stuff started happening? I think it was some kind of an environmental protest, and that seemed to be what they were trying to pin this on, with some kind of activist, if I read that right.
That's right. There was the first of all was kind of blamed on a potential kind of environmental protest, and I think it was the day before there was some environmental protesters who were kind of I think they were evacuated from or some of them were arrested. But as well, the media over here, they shone a bit of the blame on perhaps a political protest as well, and that it could potentially have been a political protest. But again, this is all in the very early days of this kind of investigation. I mean, these drones were flying in and out for for 3 days, maybe. I mean, somewhere close to that, non-stop, and reported sightings and back and forth, and it just doesn't really it doesn't add up quite. It's not something that these guys would be. I mean, the first thing, for environmentalists to do that, it just doesn't. Again, the cost involved, the energy involved, switching from drones to drones and stuff, it doesn't really make any sense. It's not really in any of the political or environmental's modus operandi,
From one thing I've gathered too, when I've done a little bit of research on drones, was the battery life on a high-end, like, commercial drone is about 30 minutes, roughly. And if you just land these and replace batteries, you'll burn it up. Those things are so hot, when they're done, as far as, most of the body on them are plastic, so you can still handle them, but as far as motors and the different components are concerned, you can't just swap out batteries and send it back up in the air. They'll burn up, and they're quite expensive. People haven't looked into these drones. They can be multiple thousands of dollars for a high-end one, so this would have had to have been planned out over a very long time span. Even if the person or group of people had the money, it would have to have been done over, quite a while, because that would have drawn a lot of suspicion if somebody would have went and just put an order in for several dozen drones or 500 or 600 batteries. That would have been very suspicious, and that would have drew, anybody's attention as far as that goes. But even some of the police that was involved, after the fact, admitted that they never even saw a drone. So still leads back to the whole UFO thing. And that's what I want, the listening audience to also realize. When you send something into my reporting center, which is Central Ohio UFO Reporting Center.us, don't think that it has to be something that you would think is alien related or extraterrestrial. Of course, that's always something a lot of people kind of hope for in the back of their mind, that they're going to be the one to report, some very interesting alien phenomena. But anything that you don't know what it is, that's considered a UFO. I've never had anybody, get upset or anything that I'm telling them that it's a jumbo jet or a planet or a star. But that's something some people think is they're going to get ridiculed or something negative's going to happen because it's not something like that. It's something more obvious. But if you're not an actual investigator that does this stuff on some sort of a regular basis, then maybe it's not going to be that obvious. So I don't want anyone to ever think that it's useless to report because it's not something you would actually think is extraterrestrial. It's just an unknown object. So never feel, bad or anything about something you might want to report. I'll take a report from anywhere. And now that I've got Chris on board here, it's really helpful for any of the listening audience that might be from over in the UK or somewhere in Europe. I can definitely do an investigation from something over there. But having him on board makes it a lot easier because he's more familiar with the lay of the land, or when I'm trying to research, maybe towns may have a different name than what I'm finding out on my own, or what's in those areas, what's closest to the surrounding towns and airports and whatever else the case may be. So it makes it quite handy to have somebody else that's closer to definitely assist me. And plus, getting a second opinion on reports and videos and photographs is always helpful. So Chris, is there anything else that you can think of that you might want to add, that you might really think really stood out and what really captured your attention more than anything else as far as this sighting?
Well, first of all, we have this kind of the blame game, so to speak, when it was first kind of who's to blame for these passengers and who's to blame for these planes being, and it was was it politics involved, was it environmentalists, and even it was even talked about perhaps it was an ISIS or a terrorist kind of threat, that it was people that were doing it. But again, nobody claimed responsibility. So that kind of put that in the back burner. So it was certainly something else that was happening, because that'd be great. I mean, if ISIS was to say, oh, it was us that did it, they'd love to claim responsibility. I mean, they caused over 100,000 passengers to be gridlocked, you know what I mean? Not allowed off planes. And then it makes you think as well. Me and William were talking about this, was the logistics of the whole operation, if indeed it was drones. I know William said anywhere in the region of about 500 batteries, because these drones only maybe fly for 30 minutes. And again, I was speaking to a drone enthusiast who told me that these drones get really, really hot underneath the kind of the body of a drone. They have a heat sink, I believe. And again, these are not, I know William said commercial, but these were classed as industrial drones, which were more than kind of what was available on the shelf to buy. These were drones that were specialised, People had paid a lot of money for these specific drones, and I say that in quotes. The body of these drones, they heat up really, really, they get really, really hot, and it's always advised not to pick the drone up directly, after it's flew. You've got to kind of let it sit for a wee while before it, to let it cool down a wee bit. And tying in with that is there was police helicopters in the sky trying to locate these drones, and they're using infrared. So, if there's a drone there that's landing, if it's anywhere near the airport, it's going to pick that heat sensor from the drone up straight away. It's going to stand straight out, but nothing. And again, this is reported maybe multiple drones flying in unison. And just the whole kind of operation that's involved. And again, there's no evidence that drones, there was no drones ever kind of collected or said, oh, these were the drones, or the people that were arrested were later released because there was, in fact, I think they were wrongfully arrested. There was no kind of trail, so everything went cold for a while, and that's where we're at. 1,000 flights diverted everywhere from Amsterdam and Paris and even parts in Germany. And I remember specifically watching, I think it was one of the kind of flight radar systems, and a flight coming all the way from Germany to the UK, and as it hit the coast, and this is while the coast of England, and while Gatwick still closed, it flew all the way back to Germany because we're not allowing it to land anywhere in the UK. Bearing in mind we have probably about within the 100 mark airports in the UK, so to have to divert the flight 4 hours back the way is just very, very strange. And again, the eyewitness accounts as pilots speaking, people that are well schooled in flights, and they're seeing things in the sky, or seeing things that are not quite right, and they're reporting it. And there's no evidence, there's no drones, and again, probably something I'd like to speak about is the penalty involved, because it's such a high profile case. The threat to life, the laws that were broken. I mean, it's illegal to fly drones into airports, but the fact that the laws that were broken, I mean, you're talking penalties up to anywhere near 25 years under the penalty of danger to life, because you're flying drones. And so it's not like it's even, there's no a cause there really to do that, to spend 25 years to fly a bit of plastic, and it just doesn't really make sense, But again, stranger things have happened. There's another thing I was going to say. There's a 2 mile radius as well around Gatwick Airport, which is a drone. I don't know. It's to do with kind of flying drones. 2 miles that you're not allowed to fly drones anywhere within 2 miles of the airport. And again, me and William had spoke about the technology that these drones have. They have, some of them have the technology to, when you're flying near an airport, the drone will either just shut off completely if it's within the radius. This is with the technology that's within the drone. So I think the drones use GPS or some sort of kind of mapping system to say, look, your drone's getting too close to the airport, we're going to send it back, or we're going to just stop it completely. These drones were able to, fly over the barriers, the barriers that are put up in front to stop that, So, you're talking about cost, you're talking about the kind of the time scale. The operation this would take is phenomenal, for it to be some guy with his drone kit. It doesn't make sense, and that's what I'm kind of getting at,
I agree, and it reminded me of something else too. Is a lot of UFO reports from in the past where they would fly over different military installations or some of our nuclear missile areas, and it seems like this followed a similar pattern as whoever initially reported it and sounded the alarm kind of gets spooked a little bit, and they're like not wanting to really take responsibility or let it be known that they reported it, so they just pass the buck, so to speak, and get somebody else involved, and then that group gets the next agency involved. Because the way the timeline of this incident was, seemed like every couple hours a new agency was being involved, whether it was military or police. Could have been just about anybody. And I think people might have got kind of spooked in a way that, man, if this turns out to be nothing, then we're going to get blamed for all these flights being canceled and all these people being stranded here and there and stuck on planes for hours. So nobody really wanted to take responsibility that, hey, we were the first to actually see this. Because if you're the one that starts the accusations, then it's up to you to prove it. And after hours go by, there's really no proof, and nobody wants to be that first one in line they caused all this. And that's kind of something I noticed.
We're talking about agencies as well, William. You're talking about the obviously the initial the police showing up, then the armed police, and then the army, and then like snipers posted. It's incredible, for the sake of drones, and to eventually not have anything, you know what I mean? And the drone just goes away, and that's it, and everybody carries on as usual over 3 days of kind of chaos here. I mean, you've got to understand as well that Gatwick's the second largest airport in the UK, and the only one that it's only outdone by Heathrow, so to speak. So the 3 days of chaos for nothing, no arrests, well, no people that were arrested for it, no drones, no kind of, no footage as well. I mean, it's another big one as well.
Exactly. The agencies that were called in my opinion, couldn't have stopped it if they found the drones. They were the wrong type of people to deal with that kind of an incident. They were more of the type you would think of for a legit UFO type incident is what you would think would be deployed. The military and those different agencies, not for something drone related. They wasn't much they could really do with the tools and equipment and everything that they had at their disposal. They were more of a danger to the people that were there than anything, in case they tried to shoot something down, and then you got that whole liability. So yeah, there was a lot of things that just definitely didn't add up. But it's still, up until this point, there's been no confirmations or no resolve of anything. So if anything ever comes about of this, or any new information or something that seems worth putting out there for people to know about, kind of a follow-up, then we may do so. But that's pretty much what we've got on this particular case. Like I say, when you start hearing a lot of things mentioned about drones, just remember that's kind of the modern day weather balloon. So, like I say, that's pretty much where I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank Chris, the Mad Scotsman there, for taking time out of his schedule to do this, and hopefully in the near future we can have him back on if anything warrants, something from his side of the pond, so to speak. So hope everybody that listened enjoyed the podcast so far. And if you've got any questions or concerns with my reporting center, which again is Central Ohio UFO Reporting Center.us, feel free to hit me up on Facebook or the website itself and leave a comment. If you've got any comments for Chris, you can still reach him through the website, and I can pass everything along. So hope everybody has a safe rest of your day. Chris, you got anything you want to add to wrap this up real quick?
I know. I mean, if anybody's, anybody's interested in this specific case, let me know, because I followed it straight away. And I mean, I remember speaking to William when it first started, and we were laughing about how ridiculous it was. And then, and as the days went on, we were kind of going, this is a bit ridiculous. Is this something more? And even something I can kind of throw out there is that there's some, I would say, unconfirmed tweets that somebody had gave birth on one of the planes. And then we were speaking about how, there's a wee bit of, and this is if it's true that, to do with kind of extraterrestrial kind of beings, that's something that's quite a common kind of aspect. But that's just something I've thrown out there, But that's any information that you might have as well would be great to hear from you.
So that's pretty much what we got for this episode of the Haddox Report. So stay safe, everybody, and as always, keep looking up.
If you're into the paranormal, the weird, the unexplained, tune into the new hit radio talk show on Odyssey Internet Radio, Paranormal Road. Every Tuesday evening at 8 p.m., Dave and Randy explore various paranormal topics with featured guests and audience stories. Have you had a paranormal experience? Crossed paths with the dogman? Experienced a haunting? Owned a haunted object? Or perhaps had a UFO encounter? If you have had a paranormal experience and would like to be a guest on Paranormal Road, please contact us. Send us an email outlining your experience and be sure to include your contact information. Our email contact information is podcast@evpmediums.com. Again, podcast@evpmediums.com.
Do you know what it means to miss New Orleans when that's where you left your heart? And there's something more. I miss the one I care for more than I miss New Orleans.
And that was Billie Holiday and Louis Armstrong. And I'd like to dedicate that song to Karen from Cedar Point. I know they were two of your favorite artists. And folks, on the line with us tonight is Chad and Elta. And I have to apologize right up front. We tried several attempts to get a clean line, so it's not the most perfect line for interviewing, but we're going to have to make do. Welcome to the show, Chad and Elta.
Hi, Randy. Thank you so much for having us.
No problem. We're excited.
Oh, yeah, we're really excited to hear the story and to talk with you folks.
Hi, Randy and Dave, and this is Alta, and we're so honored to be here. We understand this is somewhat of a fairly new launch for you all, and we're just honored to have an opportunity to be a part of this.
Oh, thanks so much. We're happy about that, too.
Yeah, the honor is all ours. Trust me. We're thrilled to have you on the show, and we've had our share of technical difficulties with this one, and I'm beginning to wonder, is this paranormal or what? But
right.
let's I'm going to turn more or less the show over to you guys, and if you can tell us about how this all began for you. I mean, I've read your book, and it is just so fascinating. A little bit disturbing.
Right.
And I can only imagine how you guys feel through the experience. It's just so, wow, scary.
Scary. Yeah, oftentimes it's very scary. And then, also, for me, fascinating and lots of questions. And, on my end of it, for the most part, I don't find answers. And it just, rather than stop, just continue to keep moving forward with it. I liken it to that kind of one day at a time oftentimes. Chad's kind of handed this off to me to sort of frame this for everyone. So I'm 10 years older than Chad. I happen to come from the Southwest Territories originally. I'm told I'm of mixed native blood, French and and Scottish as well. I'm raised somewhat of a fairly native background, but I'm raised with primarily a mother. We traveled a great deal around the country, but from the very beginning of my understanding, my mom, who didn't trust very many people, very few in fact, and she had a lot of mystery in her life, and that's going to be, maybe irritating to folks that are kind enough to listen to us, maybe interesting to others, but I don't have any answers. All I have is what I've been told and what I remember and what I've experienced. But her words are that when I'm about 6 months old, this would be in the late 50s, she claims that I'm the only passenger in the car with her and she's driving. And she says it's daylight and that essentially a UFO, a small UFO came out of the sky and landed on the road or the highway and stopped her. Now, at that point of me ever remembering her ever sharing that, because it was so brief, as I've said in the past, anybody who ever knew my mom really seemed to care a great deal about her, but never challenged her. She was a very powerful woman in many ways. And so anyhow, with that said, I never challenged her either. All I did was, I just got very embarrassed and I'd try to crawl out of the room.
I think we have the same mother.
Yeah, exactly. So you get me. It was not something I was interested in hearing nothing about. And that also will frame the fact that I had no interest in anything out there at all. And, never did. Other than the beautiful sky and the stars. Other than that, though, nope, just not really interested in nothing out there. So I'll just kind of move forward very quickly now. This is, I'm a 6-month-old baby when she claims that this happened. So now, if I may, I'll also mention lots of mystery in my life, and it seems to start with when I'm around the age of 9, somewhere in that age range, is really my first memory. I don't have any memory before that. So when people talk about missing time, it seems the first 9 years are missing.
Wow.
Yeah. And so the first memory is me being, I'll just say it is short, brief, and what I do know is my first memory is being tested for what was known as ESP. And it happened to be in Aurora, Colorado. And it also happened to be in a military hospital known as Fitzsimmons Hospital. So let me also mention, because I've had many people over the years address and question and suggest and in not so nice ways indicate that I have to be one of these military MELAB sort of language, you put any initial to it, because you hear these stories if you're investigating or you're involved in this. And I just have to say that if that's true, I have no awareness of it, and I have no awareness of any family other than my mom. I had a stepfather at the time, but he passed when I was about 15 years old from cancer. He was not, I was not aware of him. He may have had some military service long before he came into our lives. I have no idea, because it was just not anything that I'm aware of. So whatever the case may be, I'm being tested for ESP. And then now we can begin to, again, move forward. We love questions, by the way. I'm speaking for Chad. He's about to take over because he speaks just fine on his own. And, we vary on some things as well. But we do love questions, so please, anytime.
Okay,
feel free to interject or ask, because we're open to all.
Okay, great.
So just moving this along now, I'll move this now to, I had a lot of experiences. I kind of babied up the language just to take the scary out of so much of it, because it's been so scary in a lot of ways. I've had a lot of experience throughout my life with the ghosty world, the unseen, and I think a world maybe you all are more familiar with and what have you. That was common to me. I never really, just never went out of my way to think that was too strange.
And don't you think we're kind of like magnets for that? I mean, when you start off your life early, with strange things, like you call strangeness, don't you think that attracts a lot too?
I just have to say I'm so open to all thoughts. I honestly don't know.
I think we're like
That's
antennas.
The problem is I just don't know anything.
We're like an antenna, It's just if it's
Right.
out there, it's going to find us.
It would seem to be, certainly seems to be at this stage of the game. So, that realm was not something that I just thought was that unusual. My mom certainly seemed to know more about me than I understood, and I don't feel that she thought it was so unusual either in my realm. It did not seem to be in her realm, but who knows? Because again, she had a lot of mystery.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyhow, that's my high strangeness world, if you will. Pretty high strange, but a lot of mystery with no answers. Up until now, if I may, I'll move us to 1990. My mom has moved to Little Rock, Arkansas in the 70s. And I moved there with her. I was in my second year of college. And I just was a mama's girl, and I didn't want to be parted from her. So she tells me all of a sudden one day, we happen to be living in the Midwest. She's moving to, and I'm like, what the hey is Little Rock, Arkansas? I knew nothing about right. I understood nothing about the South. And it just sounded exotic and strange, and okay, I guess we're going to Little Rock, Arkansas. So we get relocated there, and that just sets up a whole another ball game of maybe not as high strange, but my mom decides she's going to go to college. So she had started in the Midwest, and then she picks it back up in Little Rock, Arkansas in the late 70s, and it would just so happen she decides she wants to get involved in the world of law. She's going after a law degree, and as it would be, Bill Clinton was Attorney General at the time of the state. He happened to be my mom's law professor.
Wow.
Again, life is very weird. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Hillary Clinton's law offices were connected to my mom's office, and it was like, oh, this is... I certainly didn't think so at the time because nobody understood who they were, but life is strange. So my mom's
current times, that would be high strangeness.
On a local level on politics and what have you, things I'm not interested in, but I took note of it all. And so now, if I may, that was in the late 70s. I've been in and out of the state. I keep coming and going because I've chosen not to marry, and I never thought I'd have children, nor did I ever think I'd get married, and I just was going to carry on with my life. I'd had too much mystery in my life, and I just felt like, I couldn't foresee that it was going to change. Now again, 1990, I have returned to Little Rock. I'd been living out in the West Coast, and in various other places, like kind of a vagabond. And so I decided it's time to come home. I miss my mom and what have you, but I came back at a time that I was in a really clouded place. At that time now I'm 33, never married, no children. And it's getting darker for me because, again, my mysteries are just getting bigger. And I feel like I'm kind of sinking in myself. I haven't stuck around to develop any kind of social, real connections. And so, anyhow, I'm not doing so hot emotionally. I take a new job. I'm there a week on the job is what I remember. Happens to be in medical equipment. Well, I hated it, and it hated me. I can barely turn a computer on now. I just never understood any of that technical stuff. So
You sound like you're Randy's sister on that one.
Well, again, we share the same mama. It sounds like it's all in the family.
Yeah, really.
So me being very already dark mood and just not happy with myself, and I was really just not happy with myself. I happened to be staying with my mom at the time. That wasn't helping either. And so I decide on this particular day, it's Valentine's Day. Well, I don't decide, this young guy, and I'm about to have Chad, actually, he speaks. He's about to jump into this story. We'll have Chad pick this story up now as to Valentine's Day 1990.
Yeah, we were just wondering what Chad thought about all this. There was strangeness there, and yet there was an attraction.
Yeah, a friend of mine called me up that day and wanted to do a blind date. Well, I worked in a restaurant that night, and I'm like, well, I can't work. I'm working. I can't. He goes, call in sick. I'm like, no, they'll kill me. It's Valentine's Day. So anyway, after work, all of us, nothing but guys that work there. So, and of course, none of us had dates. So, we decided to go to the local pub and play darts. And I get there, and for some reason, I don't know why, I went there to play darts with my friends, but I believe all of them, and I go to totally the other side of this pub and start playing pinball machine by myself. And I look over towards the bar, and I see this lady sitting there, and so I go up to her and I ask her if she wants to play pinball, and she kind of looked at me funny, like, no, but she said, no, I'll play with you. That's fine. I hate pinball, but I'll play. So we get over to the pinball machine and we play a game of pinball, and she looks at and then I ask her if she wants to play again. She said, yeah. Well, what's your name? And I said, Chad. She goes, did a guy named David call you today? And I'm like, yeah. She goes, well, I'm Alta. I'm the person that you were supposed to meet. So, essentially we were a blind date that didn't happen that happened anyway. So
now that's high strangeness.
We end up, I was still living with my mom at the time, so, and she was gone always, I always had the house to myself, so she was at her boyfriend's house. So Alta comes over to my house, and we sit up all night just talking, and my mom comes in the next morning, like 5, 6 o'clock the next morning, and I introduce, she's getting ready to go get ready for work, and so I'm like, Mom, this is Alta. Alta, this is my mom, Janice, and, so my mom goes on into the bedroom and to get ready, and she calls me back, and she's like, does that name sound familiar to you, Alta? Does that name sound familiar to you? And I'm like, no. She goes, that's your grandfather, my dad's name. He always went by George because he thought Alta was feminine, but his real name is Alta George Duncan. So I'm like, wow, that's crazy. So I go in, back into the living room where Alta's at, and I'm like, Alta, my mom just told me that my grandfather's name is Alta. That I always knew him as George, or Papa is what I knew him as. But and she's looking at me funny. She goes, well, what's his last name? I said, Duncan. She was like, well, that's my mom's maiden name. So essentially, I married Alta Duncan, which is my grandfather. So it's very, very
bizarre.
strange.
Yeah.
In their meeting that day.
I'd like to interject also. We have since written a book, and it has been edited quite a bit from our original manuscript of the book. So I'm not sure, it's been edited down quite a bit. So I'm not sure if this is still in the book or not, but I'd like to mention that there was tremendous, and from my standpoint, tremendous high strangeness that took place that night of Valentine's, because what Chad has just described is really the sweet side of this and the more comical side and the mysterious side of it. But what I experienced prior to meeting Chad that night, there is absolutely no doubt, and I've always used the word, we were, without any doubt to me, arranged.
Yeah, exactly.
We're arranged by a hidden hand that scared the stuffing right out of me.
Yeah.
I'd already had way too much mystery in my world. So when Chad tells me that this is his grandfather's name, well, I freaked. I do it internally. I don't think he's aware of what I'm feeling inside. I think I'm covering it up on the outside, but I made up my mind right then and there, this is done. I'm not ever going to see him again.
Wow.
And it was horrible because I was so connected to him, and I was feeling so wonderful to have this, opportunity. So anyhow, speeding the story along without getting lost in that, but there's a whole lot of mystery involved in that I did my best to record about what got me to that location where Chad and I were arranged. I had never been there either. This was a big sports bar. I had never been there. Neither one of us had ever been to this place before. And so from that moment, now 3 months, I kind of was MIA. He could not find me, and I had made up my mind that was going to be enough of that. And then all of a sudden, again, a whole lot of high strangeness involved, reconnected us 3 months later. And then life gets on with it. We get reconnected, 3 months later, and then we marry a year later. And then I'll get us now to, this is now 1995, and Chad and I have moved to Louisiana. My mom had moved to Louisiana first. She had left Arkansas, had moved to some folks. She was single, she was a widow, and not doing as well health-wise, and Chad and I were living someplace else in the country, and she had this invitation to come and live on some folks. They had a very large piece of property with a couple homes on it, so the idea was she was going to go there, and she extended the invitation to Chad and I to come and join her. Well, we missed her, so we didn't hesitate. And not having children, please all remember, it makes it much easier to, make these kind of crazy decisions of just up and moving. So we relocated to Louisiana in 1995. If I may now again, so I don't just dominate the conversation, I'm going to have Chad, I'm going to have Chad pick it back up about, that was our first experience together that I'm aware of this, I'll frame that with a huge question mark of what was in the sky that we both experienced. And that seemed to be my point of view, is jumping us off, if you will, at not being able to be asleep anymore.
Yeah.
About things going on with us.
We're firm believers in things happen for a reason, and people meet each other for a reason, paths cross for a reason, and, wherever that comes from, it was meant.
Right. Well, this happened in, like I said, 95. We were going into town. We kind of lived kind of outside of town, more rural area, but we were coming into town, and
the town was Hammond, Louisiana, if anybody's interested.
Yeah, this is Hammond, Louisiana, and we came around this group of trees, like in the bend in the road, these big pines, and back behind the pines were was the kind of the local grocery or Walmart supercenter, and
yeah.
And so when we get around this bend in the road and this group of trees, we look up in the sky, and there's this craft, and it is huge. I mean, it's just huge. It's fairly low to the ground, I would say below cloud level, and it was bigger than the Walmart, the shopping center, the parking lot, and I mean, it was just huge.
Chad, what
was
it shaped like? Was it a triangle? Was it
no,
saucer?
It was kind of like more like long, like a rectangle,
Mm-hmm.
It was very long.
Like an isosceles, if you know that shape.
Yeah.
But not as pointed, right?
Yeah, it wasn't pointed like anything. It was kind of, rectangular shape, but one end was wider than the other end.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Two or three lights in the front, 2 or 3 lights in the back. Very dark. Again, huge. And I'm driving, and this was on the left-hand side of the road. the right-hand side of the road. So I look over, and I'm looking at this, and I see Alta look up at it, and then she looks at me. I look back at it, and she turned her head and didn't look back again. I look back, and I'm like, am I seeing what I'm really seeing? You know, and then when she reacted, I'm like, okay, I'm seeing what I'm seeing.
Chad, I hate to do this to you, buddy, but we're out of time for this segment. We have to go to a quick commercial break, but I want you to pick up on that story when we return.
Don't let the negativity of today's world get you sidetracked from your life's journey. Visit It's Your Journey Metaphysical Store at 4750 Cleveland Road East in Huron, Ohio. It's Your Journey is more than a store. It's a place of healing and knowledge. It's Your Journey carries a wide variety of healing crystals and protection stones, salt lamps, books, incense, candles, essential oils, and more. It's Your Journey also offers Reiki, energy healing, personal readings, spirit releasement, and soul retrieval. Live out of the area? No problem. Visit It's Your Journey's website at itsyourjourney.com and shop online. Shipping available worldwide. Or call 419-433-0888. Don't let negative energy stop you. Take charge. It's your journey.
And welcome back to the Paranormal Road. And we're just where Chad was talking about they're experiencing this massive UFO, and I'm kind of like hanging on the edge of my seat waiting to hear more. So Chad, if you could pick back up and right where you left off.
Yeah, so, you know, I look up at, you know, at it again. I look down at Alta. She looks at me, and then we, you know, of course, we're driving, we're moving. We don't see any other traffic, like people pulling over or pointing into the sky or anything like that. So, you know, and of course, this was before, you know, phone cameras. You know, of course, no pictures. And so I focused my, you know, attention back to the road. We went on to dinner that night. We went on to the restaurant. We didn't talk about it. We didn't say anything about it. We, you know, and when I was looking at it and I turned back away from it, I was like, okay, if I don't acknowledge it, if I don't look at them, they won't know I saw them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if that makes any kind of sense. You know, like, okay, if I don't acknowledge them, you know, they won't know, and, you know, we can go on, you know, with life. And like I said, we went on to the restaurant. We didn't talk about it. The only reason we talked about it the next morning is we heard it on the news that people had seen strange things in the sky the night before.
So other people did see it.
Right. There were reports. Like I said, I didn't see any kind of like traffic during this, you know, as we were experiencing, but apparently other people had seen something strange in the sky there.
Well, the confirmation was good. At least you weren't the only one, and that probably had to give you a little bit of relief anyway.
But you know, actually, no.
Okay, never mind.
No, not at all.
That means it's real.
That's right, because it forced us, and this is, you know, my language is, it forced us not to be able to have the luxury to be asleep anymore. Because at that point, but now again, interesting behavior. I love studying behavior, and boy, we've got the weirdest of it. Because what I observed out of all of this is, not only did we not speak about it, we had to hear that because there was no way not to. You couldn't unhear it after we'd heard that others or somebody else had reported it, but we never spoke about it again. Not again. Now that's just bizarre. But again, we're just reporting to anybody, you know, we're sharing with you all absolutely our truth as we experienced it without having any understanding of the behavior. So we'll move from that point now. This is in 1995. Very shortly after, I can't even tell you, it feels so shortly in between, we decide on a whim, we're going to move to the French Quarter. French Quarter is, I'm just guesstimating, an hour away from where we were. We're going to relocate to the French Quarter. So again, please let me, and I always try to preface this, please remember we were extremely naive when we moved there. Plus, again, we didn't have children. So we didn't have to answer to anyone.
Right.
And so we moved to the French Quarter. We'd heard of voodoo before, but that was about it for me. I, of course, heard of witches before, but I grew up somewhat with a very, what I always say, a very powerful mother who needed me to understand a native perspective. So I understood about skinwalking kind of language and Sasquatchy language and all of those kinds of things, but I had not had memory of experiencing any of it, so I just sort of accepted it as part of the native culture. I wasn't needing nothing else. Now, I'd been raised in a Christian world growing up. I'd experienced Christian religions and very involved throughout my childhood. On my perspective, again, I'll have Chad share his own childhood with you all, but just so you understand, we moved to the French Quarter not knowing nothing about nothing when it comes to some of that real stuff that seems to be going down in the quarter.
You just dived right in, didn't you?
We just, we just slipped right in. Well, so be it. We had no idea the cost.
Right.
And it's very expensive to live there. And we're talking 1995, and it was very expensive then, and we were not prepared for that. So we decide we're going to live where it's available for us. It's on the perimeter of the quarter, and it happens to be above, it's an apartment above the original Voodoo Temple.
Wow.
Oh, my God. Well, we're excited at first just to have this sweet little apartment that we're going to paint and make adorable. It has this beautiful, huge courtyard. And all the movie companies would come there and make their movies anytime they needed to make voodoo-y, hoodoo-y stuff. So we got Hollywood, there. And so it's just kind of all mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Like for Chad and Alta, it was like we were just little two farmers, not really, stepping off the farm into this very exotic environment. Well, when I said exotic, on the surface it certainly seemed that way, but this voodoo temple, this ground, these buildings, my understanding is about 300 years old. And that's the original structures. The efficiency apartments in the courtyard that were behind our apartment, behind the temple, those we understood were originally slave quarters.
Wow.
So what Chad and I started experiencing was ghosties in its high form. Chad had, and he'll describe this to you if you're interested. I'm just framing everything. He'll describe to you his personal up-close encounter with the dead voodoo priest who had to have an encounter with Chad. I experienced a whole lot of stuff. Mine, on one occasion, what I call a time slip is the only way I know how to address it, where it seemed that I was in my own apartment, but it was out of time and place, as if it had been transported back to the 300 years maybe when it had been first, who knows, created or what have you. And whoever I was with, the being that I was with, was the potential of a apparition of Mary. Only she wasn't an apparition. This being was, in physical form. And then there were three other beings that were in the experience with me, with her, that happened to all be women of color, that were very scraggly and quite yummy in terms of loving. That my impression was possibly they had been slaves from back in the day. So our range of experiences are mind-blowing. But then, like I said, have Chad share with you his encounter with the voodoo priest, and then we'd like to also share, before we move forward, what we discovered about that apartment after we had left it.
Sure.
Yeah, this was like within the first, at least month, I would say week or two, of moving in. And I'm laying there, and it felt like I'm in bed asleep, and I kept waking up like there was something crawling across my chest, like a bug or something. And I'd go up and I'd scratch, and go back to sleep. And in a couple of hours, and this happened 4 or 5 times throughout the night, And if you think about it, if it was a bug, it would be in different spots. It'd be on my hair one day, and in one time, and on my leg the next, not in the same exact spot. And when I woke up the next morning, I had dug, a couple layers of skin. I dug into my skin, and so I get up, and at that time I was waiting tables, and so I get up and to go to work, and I get to work, and this vision, this memory starts coming back to me, and I remember laying there, and I kind of up above me, floating up above me, was this very African-y, dark black man, floating in front of me. Now, I could only see him from his waist up. From his waist down was kind of like a mist, or cloudy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had no shirt on. He had some like hemp beads or necklaces, kind of, very African-y looking, a couple of necklaces on. Had a very short fro, and seemed to be very short stature. But he would take his finger and he would kind of tickle me right there on my chest, kind of right around my heart area, actually. And he would tickle me, and I'd go up and scratch, and when I went to scratch, he would pull away and then fade away. And again, this happened 4, 5, 6 times throughout the night. Well, I come home and from my shift, and out to being Native American, and we always had our smudge and our burn, and and all that kind of stuff. So I get it, and I get her hawk feathers, and I get her smudge, and I'm like, okay, all right, and I got it. I mean, I got it going in there. It's smoking up the place.
We're gonna cleanse this place.
I'm like, I don't know who you are. I don't know what's going on here, but just leave us alone. You can stay. You don't have to. You don't. I'm not asking you to leave. Just leave us alone. And we're gonna paint and clean up the house. We'll have us a nice little apartment as long as we just leave each other alone. No problem. So never again. I had no problems like that. But a couple of months later, now the voodoo priest had died just like within a month or so before we had moved in to this apartment. But this couple moved in down below us like a month or so after my experience, and they had been married by the voodoo priest. And so they start bringing out their wedding pictures, and they hand me the picture, and they go, well, this is priest such and such, and I can't remember his name, but this is priest such and such. And they hand it to me, and I'm like, oh my God, that's who. And then I tell them the story that I just told you, and they're like, that sounds like him, that he was kind of a trickster, and he kind of tested you to see if you were cool enough to be in his space. And actually, you're living in his old apartment.
Wow.
And we're like, what? I didn't know about that, because apparently the voodoo priest and the voodoo priestess, they shared the work and the temple, but they didn't share living quarters.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we were apparently in his old apartment, which was just bizarre.
Yeah.
And then I'll kind of let Alta share.
Well, I was just going to mention, because we understand our time's somewhat short, so we can move this along. That's just to kind of give you a taste of just a little bit of what we were experiencing in the apartment. We moved out of the apartment relatively within that year, and moved into a just very fine apartment, a townhouse actually, in almost the middle of the quarter, or more towards the central of the quarter. We'll get back to that second apartment here in a moment, because this leads us into what we call, or what others call, the 1997 event that the book was essentially kind of created around. But what we discover, and I don't want to be jumping around, but just to fill in the blanks on that apartment. So Chad and I leave that apartment. We left the New Orleans area in 2001. We've just returned in 2016. So we were gone for 15 years. We discover when we come back in 2016, all kinds of things going on with that apartment. I'll, if there's time, have Chad share more about that with you. But what we also have started discovering is that there was a young couple that moved into our apartment during Katrina. They have become famous and now infamous. They're known as the Zach and Addie story. There's lots and lots of information out there. Please look into that if anyone is interested. Movies are being made about it, documentaries, New York best-selling kind of authors coming here and studying and writing all about that apartment. What it essentially came down to is this young couple, and dude ends up killing her in that apartment. My understanding, maybe a little variance on it, but our understanding is, left her in there for 12 days, turned up the air conditioning as high as it could, left her in it for 12 days, and then essentially, a whole lot to the story, but it essentially cut her up into parts.
Wow.
Detectives at the apartment discovered part of her cooking on the stove, part of her in the refrigerator. Oh my God. I mean, it's insanity.
Horrible. Yeah,
absolute insanity.
That's crazy.
But there's a book, if you're all interested in investigating it. The book is, help me, Chad the Devil. What is that? Oh, I've just lost the title. It's the Zach and Addie story. Again, very
Yeah, we'll
easy
look into
to
that.
Look into. So that takes place in that apartment. So anyhow, we leave the apartment in 95. Now we're into 96. We've relocated into this other amazing townhouse. Life's looking pretty good for Chad and Alta. We are kind of coming along. We're getting to be known in the quarter. Quarter is about 13 blocks, I understand, squared. Just gives folks an idea if you've never been here. Chad's kind of he's entrepreneuring himself and kind of creating his own businesses. I happen to be a reader and / medium. I hate using all this language because it's just so overused, but this has always been my world. And I'm working in I have always referred to it as a very exclusive shop because it's a family-owned business that started their business in 1929 in the French Quarter. And so at that time, when I come on board with this shop, they also sell very expensive items, antiques and fossils and jewelry and what have you. But readings are where their world is. And again, they were the first to create this business. And so they kept it in the family. They ran it very tight ship. And they brought me on board. And, it was beautiful because I was in a very safe environment. I worked with all walk of life, from as high authority and royalty all the way to the common, what have you. And it was, just a very interesting world I was in. Well, they had brought on board this young woman to, be sales staff and work into management. At the time, she was 24 years old. She's known as Christine in the book. Chad's 30, and I have just turned 40. Give you an idea of age perspective. But I'm a very young and always have been aged person. So they bring her on board to work in the shop. From the moment I met her, it was, and I know you'll understand what I'm saying, she was familiar. She was somebody that I knew. And so it was just wonderful. She felt like family. And just to give you a fast description of her, she's very tall, slender, long blonde hair. I love to describe her in this manner. She has an amazing laugh. She also has a very distinct ideal about her direction in life. And at that time, even as young as she was, she wanted to save the earth. And in terms of, pollution and the insanity man's doing to the earth, and particularly children, always in defense of women, but particularly children and animals. So she's of that nature. So anyhow, she asked me to go out one evening after work into the quarter to have dinner and drinks. We had never done it before. I accepted. we only lived a couple blocks from the shop. So I told her, let's call Chad. I know he'll want to join us. He did. So Chad got all cleaned up. He walks over to the shop, and we started our evening. Essentially, I'm kind of moving us into that event in 97. We step out of the shop about 9:30. She locks the door. I do remember very distinctly taking note that the energy felt off. Now, even though that's the realm I work in, that kind of realm of readings and connecting with the other side, what have you, I don't walk around and generally talk like that.
Mm-hmm.
But when we stepped out, that's why I make note of it, because it's unusual. We stepped out of the shop and it felt strange, felt off. And I remember Chad and Christine acknowledging that also. We didn't make a big deal about it. It was just weird. Well, little did I know, and I like to use this word, we stepped into the Twilight Zone. We absolutely, and to try to, describe the Twilight Zone, I've discovered you can't. If you've never experienced it, it's just impossible to describe it.
Right.
But we had stepped into the zone. And so I'm about to turn this back over to Chad. We got to our intention was just to cross the quarter. And that means we were going to start on the famous, now infamous, Bourbon Street and just work our way across the quarter. We were going to stop anywhere we chose to without any real destination, just to make the quarter. So we start off on Bourbon, and we took note instantly also. It's like, where is everybody? Quarter is a 24/7 hour party. Those bars don't close. If they shut down, it's long enough just to clean up and then, reopen.
Yeah, when I read that, when I read that in the book, I mean, I love New Orleans. I mean, it's just Bourbon Street to French Quarter. It's always busy there.
Right.
That would be bizarre. Yeah, that would be totally bizarre to walk down any of those streets and see nobody in a bar or see it without people. It's always busy there.
Alto, in comparison to where you're talking right now, where was that apartment that you were at? Was it near that area? Was it close?
I'm sorry, which apartment?
The apartment that you were talking about that was above the voodoo shop?
Right, that was on Rampart Street.
Okay.
Rampart.
Is that close to?
Blocks away.
Oh, okay. So it was relatively close.
Oh yeah, very close.
Okay.
Yeah, the temple was in between Orleans and Dauphine on Rampart, and
it sits across the street from Louis Armstrong Park.
Yeah, across from Louis Armstrong Park.
Yeah, I know where that is.
By the time we moved there, it was not a nice location.
Mm-hmm.
It was livable, but certainly wouldn't have been our preference if we'd have had any idea. It was truly economic.
Right. Well, I tell you what, we're just coming up on break, so I'd rather pick this up from this point when we get back from break, and we will be back in a moment.
Paranormal Road is proud to announce the Haddox Report. On special assignment for Paranormal Road, professional UFO investigator William Haddox will be on our show periodically with breaking UFO-related news around the world. You can expect to be kept up to date on recent sightings, crop circles, cattle mutilations, strange sounds, official government statements, and more. The Haddox Report, only on Paranormal Road.
Everybody move, get right in the groove. There ain't nothing you can lose. Now right here's the spot where we'll all get hot with a nasty mess of blues. Here's the place to slap and spank that bass, hear the music, and I mean, this is where the blues is born in New Orleans.
And welcome back to the Paranormal Road. And we're going to pick up where we left off. And Chad.
So, yeah, we're there on Bourbon Street. The bars, the first bar we went into, there was only just the manager, and then we went in there, We stopped at 2 or 3 other places after we left that. We were kind of heading more towards where the locals would hang out because, if the tourists aren't partying, the locals are. So, we'll get there. We stop at 2 or 3 other places, and we're right off Frenchman Street and Esplanade. So we've walked.
And as he just said, sorry, we stopped at 2 or 3 other places, and there's literally one soul in all of these locations that was either a bartender or a manager.
That is
if there
so
was a
bizarre.
restaurant, there was no wait staff, and there were no patrons.
Yeah, that is
It
really
the
bizarre.
Twilight Zone.
Right. Yeah. So the last thing we all collectively remember is we're standing there kind of in between Frenchman and Esplanade, and it's right out front of this place called Checkpoint Charlie's. And now there was this doorman at Checkpoint Charlie's that had never been there before. I mean, it's not a place that we went there all the time, but, a slow night, why would you have a doorman and you usually don't have this little bitty guy, you have a bigger guy. So anyway, our friend Christine that was with us that night, she's kind of started talking to him. Alton and I wander and walk down to like the mid of the block at the stoop.
It's around 11 o'clock. So we've had from 9:30 to 11 to cross the quarter to get to that spot to say, we just want to go home. I just want to go home. Chad seems to be in agreement with me. That's the last thing the 3 of us remember. The next thing I know...
Now, we're not drinking. There's no drugs. There's no drinking. We're looking for a place to, have fun, to have a party.
Right.
But
that's not happening.
Yeah, we hadn't found it yet. And it's only been an hour and a half, so...
And I'm speaking probably for all of us, but certainly for myself, I'd have welcomed somebody who would have drugged me. It would have made more sense because nothing has made any sense.
Yeah.
So it's around 11 o'clock, the last thing we know. And then the next thing I know is it's somewhere between 8 and 9 in the morning. I'm sitting up in my living room, in my apartment, cross-legged, like I am right now talking to you, and the sun's blaring through my window. I preface this, I didn't wake up, I came to, my eyes popped open, I'm rubbing my upper arms, and I feel something in my upper arm that I don't remember ever being there before. And now this is all happening instantaneously. I'm flipping out inside. Where is Chad? Where's Christine? And I seem to be the only one out of the 3 of us that came back, returned, whatever happened to us that seems to have had memory of what I call the in-between.
Mm-hmm.
So I got all that going through my head. This is all happening at the same time. And so, so that's how I came to. But because our time is so short, if I can move this along, I want to mention before I hand this back off to Chad, all 3 of us seem to have had a completely different experience that night. I seem to be the only one that has memory and what I call an unknown. Everybody else wants to call it an implant. I don't. I use the word unknown. I have no memory of it being implanted. But I have an object, an unknown in my upper arm. I seem to be the only one of the 3 of that also. Lucky me, as in I have no luck.
Yeah.
Several years later, Chad got regression done. And so maybe not the best regression that could have been done, but certainly seems to be effective because he has recall of that night. So I'd like, because I find it fascinating, I think you might as well, to hear what his regression, what came out in that regression as far as his night is concerned.
Yeah, we want to hear it.
Possibly our friend was with him, but we're not sure about that. But I definitely wasn't with him. And in my memory, he and my friend are not with me. And what happened to our friend, we're not with her. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Our last memory has been there on that stoop. My next memory that comes out in the regression is I see this bright light coming from around the corner from Frenchman Street. And it's out of the ordinary bright. It's not car lights And plus, the traffic don't flow that way. It's a one-way, and it goes up. It goes the opposite way these lights are coming from. So I get the girl's attention. We walk around the corner to see where this bright light is coming from, and there's this orb. And, it's probably about 15 foot off the ground. It's probably 12 foot in diameter, and it's probably about a half a block down the street. We all look at it, and just within seconds, it comes in and it grabs us. It engulfs us. It takes us in. It abducts us. Hence, the name of our book.
Mm-hmm.
So it just kind of takes us in. And my next memory is I'm walking down this corridor. The walls are very metallic. No rivets, no bolts, there's no seams. Everything's very smooth. I'm following this little being, and I would say he's probably about 3 foot tall, kind of a big bulbous head. Now, I only saw him from behind. I didn't see his face, but I only remember seeing him from behind. His skin, pale gray kind of skin tone. He wasn't like the grays that you see on like TV or anything. He wasn't like thin and frail. He kind of had substance to him. He kind of waddled when he walked. He was kind of dwarfish, or like a small person.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm following him. Out of the corner of my eye to my left, I could see a tall blonde female walking beside me. Now, this does describe our friend that was with us, but I did not turn to look to see if this was her.
Mm-hmm.
My next memory is I'm in this room, and it's just very dark, and it seems infinite. It just seems huge, And again, I can't see the walls. It's just very dark, black. I could see to my left, I could see a tall blonde female laying on an examining table. There were 3 beings around her, and I would say they were like 7, 8 foot tall. And their heads and all were kind of buggish, big eyes, big head.
Chad, I've heard that many times these type of abductions, they've been described as like praying mantis. Would that fit the look of them?
Yes,
Okay,
that's fair to say. It's very much like that. Their mouth close to their chin, and they were wearing these cloaks, kind of like almost like a Grim Reaper without the hood,
Mm-hmm.
And now the person on the table didn't seem to be in distress. Again, I couldn't tell who it was. There were one in her head and one on each side of her. So I focused my attention back to my immediate. I could see there were lights around her, and there were lights around, my immediate. So I turn and I look over to my right, and there's this little blue being. Now, he looks a lot like the ones that you see on TV, big bulbous head, frail, thin body, 3.5, 4 foot tall. But like I said, he was this bright or electric blue color, just vibrant blue, just beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And his presence, his aura, was that of like a professor / shaman / scientist / teacher, this ancient knowledge and wisdom, and loving, but scientific also,
Mm-hmm.
And again, throughout my experience, I was never anxious. I was never worried. I was never scared. I don't ever remember being hurt or probed or anything like that, But he goes over and he picks up this box, and he has it in his right hand. He takes his left hand and puts it into the side of the box. And he comes out, and he has there's this substance kind of free-floating above it. It looks kind of like that thin stuff that the kids, like the slime that the kids play with, but it's kind of undulating. And he takes his right hand and puts it up. Now, he only has 4 digits. He puts his middle two fingers up, and his outer fingers kind of folded in, almost kind of like a peace sign, or depictions of like the saints or Jesus or Gandhi or Buddha. How they do that.
Yeah.
And when he does this substance starts spinning, and the faster it spun, the blueness and the sparkly stuff that was in it kind of dissipate out of it and kind of rotating around it. And it starts slowing down, and it turned into this double-pointed crystal, very clear crystal. And I remember thinking to him, why are you showing this to me? I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. This is something very important. Why are you showing this to me? And he told me that I would know in time, or when it's time. Then my next memory is waking up in bed the next morning.
Wow. And I mean, and this was what you got in your regression? Or what?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
But you had no thought of that prior to the regression. You didn't remember any of that.
No. The next morning I woke up. I knew he hadn't been drinking. I knew he hadn't done any kind of drugs. I knew he couldn't have been drugged. And so my first reaction is walking up to Alta going, what the heck happened to us last night?
Right.
And then Chad
how
also,
did we get home?
Chad also took, I'm sorry to interrupt this, but I want him while he's writing that thinking to also share with you what he saw in my arms.
Yeah, I look at Alta and she's telling me about this thing in her arm, that she wakes up and she's not sure what happened. She don't know how we got home.
Oh, I'm all freaked out.
Yeah, she's already freaked out.
But I'm a controlled freak, but I'm freaked.
She's already been up an hour or so before me, and she was, going through all this alone. So I get over, and she's trying to point this thing out in her arm, and I'm like, well, look. And she had like these bruises, and they were like handprints, but they were only 4 digits and very long. They went all the way around her arm. And
both my arms.
Yeah, both arms. And as if maybe somebody was holding her up or holding her back or something like that.
Right.
Very, very strange. They didn't last very long. Again, we didn't take pictures because, again, not like we had cameras all over the place.
Our friend that was taken with us, again, whatever all really happened to us, just with whatever time we have remaining, if I may, she's given us permission to share her experience, because she's never intending to go forward with this publicly, but she says that she remembers as we did, 11-ish, on that street corner, and the next thing she knows, she's put back behind the steering wheel of her moving car. The car is moving slow. It hit a parked car and knocked off her rear view mirror, and she said that's what jolted her too. So, and also she's in another part of the city, or different section of the city from where she parked the car originally.
The fact that you guys woke up in your apartment, it almost suggests that this was not your first rodeo with these entities, because they knew where to put you back, because you were taken in the middle of the French Quarter, but you were delivered back to where you lived.
Right.
Have you?
Yeah, we were 8, 9, 10 blocks, from our apartment, at that point.
Have you ever,
for that to happen?
Right. In my experience, again, probably no time at this stage for, my event, but in my experience, it appeared I was standing on another planet, like it looked like the moon, the so-called moon landing. That's what it looked like my environment was, or the ancient past of this planet, or the distant future of this planet. Whatever it was, it looked like I was standing on the moon. And I'm with a female. If anybody ever looks at the book, be sure, turn that cover over and you see this astonishingly beautiful blonde female that is the being that I'm with, having a whole completely different experience.
Well, it's
Yeah.
It's
and then return to our apartment. You're
Yeah.
right.
It suggests that it's something that's been ongoing, and it would be interesting to see further regression. What might you discover? But it's one of those where it's almost like, do you really want to know? You know,
right.
It's like, be careful what you wish for.
But
we speak of that often. Chad and I, I certainly do. I bring it up as often as he'll be able to handle it, listening it from me, and we're always asking, because he's not said no, because we know that there's probably so much more inside of him, and in my case, I've tried and it did not, I have to say it failed miserably, but I had some amazing high strangeness that took place during that experience. So there's all kinds of stuff probably still going on inside of me, and so we're certainly very open to that.
Well, it's I'll tell you what.
If it ever lends to it.
We can't thank you enough for being on the show tonight. I cannot believe we're out of time already. It's just
this happens
so
to us when we get so
like,
interested, and then our time runs out. But we really do appreciate you coming on and talking with us and sharing your stories.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back.
This will have to be another to be continued and talk more. But we want to make sure everybody out there gets your book, Abducted in the French Quarter.
How can they get that?
Well, you can contact us direct at off of our Facebook page, or Abducted in the French Quarter, or you can go to Etsy. We do sell it on Etsy. And if you're in the French Quarter or around the French Quarter or in New Orleans area, there's the place where Alex works. It's called Earth Odyssey, and they sell them there. They also have some beautiful crystals and shiny, beautiful jewelry, and we also sell it at the Happy Hookah, which is the place.
Sounds like a place we need to go.
The Happy Hookah.
We don't have any of those, I might add.
Yeah.
and before we part, we'd love to extend how much we appreciate Susan and Nancy for this connection with you, Dave,
Absolutely.
and
Right.
you as well. We're just all three of you on that end of it. We're just so grateful, and thanks so much for having us. We wish you the absolute best ahead.
Oh, you too, and it was our pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much, and everyone, please check out their book and check them out on Facebook.